public imagination is fixated on the wrong vector. You have been conditioned to watch the skies for hypersonic missiles, a high-cost, high-signature kinetic event. This is a strategic diversion. The mathematical certainty of a systemic collapse does not arrive with a fireball. It arrives with silence, a total information blackout. As analysts at Tech Explore warn, specific cyber attacks are now architected to trigger cascading societal crises. The primary weapon is not explosive force. It is the severance of the digital nervous system that underpins the global economy. The protocol is two-pronged. While subscale assets neutralize the undersea cables, a concurrent action targets orbital assets, not with debris-creating projectiles, but with ground-based lasers. The objective is temporary, non-kinetic, and plausibly deniable. Strategic blinding. This sequence creates the terminal condition strategists refer to as the blind Leviathan, a superpower stripped of its satellite intelligence and real-time financial data, is forced to operate on corrupted information. Its conventional force projection becomes insolvent, paralyzed by uncertainty. When a state cannot see, it cannot distinguish a network failure from a decapitation strike. In this state of induced paranoia, with its foundational systems fracturing, what is its final, pre-delegated leverage? The only asset not requiring network validation, the launch on warning protocol. This is how engineered silence becomes the mathematical accelerant for thermonuclear exchange. Conventional analysis frames war as a contest of will. This is a fatal miscalculation. War is an audit. When a state's domestic liabilities exceed its capacity to project conventional kinetic force, it faces a solvency crisis. The math no longer works. According to RUSI analysis, the motive for Russia's strategic pivot was not ideology, but domestic insolvency. An unpopular war, funded by a brittle economy, created a mathematical imperative to abandon high-cost kinetic operations. The state's balance sheet could no longer support the venture. Weakness forces a pivot to asymmetry. Unable to sustain the kinetic cost, the strategy shifted. As documented by Medusa, Russia's winter attack campaign was engineered not for conquest, but to fracture Ukraine's power grid, a low-cost method to trigger a high-impact societal crisis. This is the blueprint. As security scientists warn, cyber attacks are now a primary vector for triggering systemic failure. The goal is to attack the fragile infrastructure that underpins a society, turning its own domestic liabilities into the weapon. This vulnerability is not abstract. It is a feature of our own system. In Los Angeles, firefighters confirm that decades of underinvestment have crippled emergency response. The department has the same staffing as the 1960s, but faces 5 times the call load. This is an engineered fragility, a domestic liability waiting for a trigger. This is the motive. A solvency crisis erases conventional options and forces a pivot to asymmetric warfare. The objective is not to win on the battlefield, but to make the adversary's social and economic systems insolvent. It is the desperate, mathematical endgame of a failing state. The math of modern conflict is inverted. Analysis from the Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, places the kinetic cost of a main battle tank at approximately $5 million. The cost of the FPV drone that can achieve a mission, kill against it, $500. This is a 10,000 to 1 leverage ratio against conventional military solvency. It represents a fundamental protocol shift, the democratization of violence. The ability to project lethal, strategic force is no longer the exclusive domain of state-level actors. This economic model isn't confined to the battlefield. The same asymmetric cost-benefit analysis applies to domestic infrastructure. As reports on the LAFD crisis confirm, decades of underinvestment have created a target-rich environment where the cost to neutralize a multi-billion-dollar asset is a rounding error. The calculus is irrefutable. When the cost to attack plummets and the cost to build or defend skyrockets, a systemic solvency crisis is a mathematical certainty. Engineered fragility is the primary vector for collapse. The theater of operations is not where legacy media directs your attention. The primary front is not a kinetic battlefield. It is a distributed network of proxy laboratories. These are strategically selected regions where the mathematics of systemic collapse are tested and refined. CSIS designates these as gray zones, areas of engineered instability used to stress test attack vectors before deployment against the primary target. Consider the operational blueprint revealed in Ukraine. The methodical, winter-long campaign to fracture the power grid was not just an act of war, it was a live-fire demonstration. Source: WW3. It provided a precise data set on how to dismantle a modern nation's energy solvency, node by node. This isn't a regional conflict, it's a renewable crisis model, a playbook for export. Source number 1. Regional instability is a symptom, not the cause. It is a staging ground. The true vulnerability is not external. It is the engineered fragility of the target state. The Los Angeles Fire Department's budget crisis is a perfect microcosm. Officials state that decades of underinvestment have crippled their response capabilities, reducing them to 1960s staffing levels against a 5-fold increase in demand. Source number 3. This is the blueprint for systemic failure. In these gray zones, adversaries are perfecting asymmetric attacks designed to exploit this exact liability. The goal is to trigger a societal crisis with minimal kinetic cost. Source number 2. They are calibrating the precise dosage of cyber, biological, or financial shock required to initiate a cascading failure within a system hollowed out by its own policies. This isn't a mistake. It's a feature of fourth-generation warfare. The data gathered from these proxy laboratories is the final input. RUSI analysts warn that the next phase involves deploying these perfected, low-cost attack vectors directly against Western infrastructure. The solvency crisis they trigger is designed to neutralize conventional military superiority, leaving a superpower with only one remaining instrument of leverage: its launch-on-warning nuclear protocol. The path to escalation begins in the rot of a neglected fire station. The entire architecture of nuclear deterrence rests on a protocol analysts at CSIS define as launch-on-warning. The logic is absolute. Once an incoming nuclear strike is detected by satellite and radar, retaliation is launched before the incoming warhead's impact. This is designed to preempt a decapitation strike that would destroy the capacity to respond. The system is engineered for speed, not deliberation. The decision window is not hours, it is minutes. The primary vector for exploiting this protocol is not a hypersonic missile, but a targeted cyber attack. As scientists warn, such attacks are designed to trigger societal crises. The target is the network of early warning satellites and ground-based radar, the digital nervous system of the state. After what internal documents describe as decades of underinvestment, this infrastructure is no longer an asset. It is a systemic liability. This induces the fog of digital war. When the screens go dark, the commander is rendered blind. The core dilemma becomes irrefutable. Is this a random system failure, a predictable outcome of managed decay, or is it a coordinated blackout preceding an imminent first strike? The launch-on-warning protocol removes ambiguity. To hesitate is to risk total strategic insolvency. The mathematical certainty is that the perceived cost of being wrong by waiting is infinitely higher than the cost of being wrong by launching. An adversary, therefore, does not need kinetic force. They need only to introduce enough ambiguity to force the protocol to its catastrophic conclusion. This engineered fragility is the accelerant. The kinetic cost for the attacker is near zero. The result is thermonuclear escalation. The thesis of systemic risk is validated not by abstract theory, but by filed budgets. The LAFD operates with staffing from the 1960s against 5 times the call load, a condition they label decades of underinvestment. This is not a local crisis. It is a national blueprint for engineered fragility. As scientists warn, cyber attacks are designed to trigger societal crises by targeting precisely these pre-weakened nodes. The playbook, field-tested against Ukraine's power grid, is to fracture the system, not shatter it kinetically. The adversary seeks maximum leverage at minimum cost. Therefore, the calibration shot will occur within the next 12 months. It will not be an explosion. It will be an attribution. Impossible, multi-day service interruption at a Tier 1 U.S. maritime port or a primary cloud data center cluster. The objective is not destruction, but data acquisition on systemic response latency and the velocity of the resulting liquidity crisis. It is a test to confirm the mathematical accelerant before triggering a full-spectrum solvency event.